This episode of Military Matters is brought to you by Stars and Stripes. Stars and Stripes provides independent news and information to the U.S. military community, including active duty service members, DoD civilians, veterans, contractors, and their families. Unique among Department of Defense authorized news outlets, Stars and Stripes is governed by the principles of the First Amendment. No slants, no agendas, just the news.
Use promo code podcast and save yourself 50% off your digital subscription. That's promo code podcast, 50% off your digital subscription.
Go to stripes.com and see the difference for yourself. That's stripes.com.
When your orders come in and it's time to make a plan to move or store your personally owned vehicles, International Auto Logistics is here as the #1 resource for U.S. service members' POV needs. Just use their website and get started at www.pcsmypov.com to get all of the information you'll need on storing and picking up your vehicle. Or just check out the just launched IAL mobile app. Just search for PCS My POV on the Apple Store or on Google Play. Imagine for a moment that you're in a military convoy traveling through a hostile area when suddenly a loud explosion jolts you in your seat. Your ears are ringing, smoke's filling the vehicle cabin, and you're reaching for the door. Suddenly, it opens, smoke starts to waft out, the heat kicks up, someone's reaching inside and they're trying to pull you out. But they can't. They pull and they pull, but they're not strong enough to pull your body weight and your gear. This is one of many nightmare scenarios that have prompted the branches across the Department of Defense to re-examine their physical fitness tests. In this episode, we talk to the Army, Marines, Navy, and Air Force to find out how they're keeping up with the ever-changing world of fitness. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Desmon Farris.
This is Military Matters. For a very long time, physical fitness looked pretty similar across the spectrum of military branches.
Push-ups,
sit-ups,
maybe some pull-ups,
and a run, something between 1.5 miles and 3. But all that has begun to change. Over the last 20 years, the wars in the Middle East have given leaders a lot to think about. From billion-dollar satellites to increasingly protective body armor, the military has sought to evolve faster than the enemy.
The average service member has seen their personal protective equipment become more robust, covering more of the body and in turn becoming heavier and more cumbersome. Although the service member is far more protected today than they were 20 years ago, that protection has come at a price, both physically and fiscally.
In this episode of Military Matters, we're talking about fitness, and not just any fitness, but military fitness.
What's the difference between military fitness and all other fitness?
That's actually a question that sits at the heart of the DoD's changing physical fitness standards. What exactly is military fitness? Is there a military fitness, or is there an Army fit, a Marine fit, Air Force and Navy fitness? One thing is certain, though, is that the military has looked to the civilian sector for inspiration and ideas, but they've done so knowing that, for example, a CrossFitter may be very fit, but they're not training necessarily to be fit in a fight. So the attention for some branches has turned to occupational fitness, while others have turned to a more general fitness approach across their particular military branch.
So we were initially inspired to do an episode on military fitness standards after the Army unveiled its newest fitness test, the ACFT, or for you non-military folks, the Army Combat Fitness Test. And Rod, from what I've heard, it's an extreme change from the previous APFT, or Army Physical Fitness Test.
The APFT was the test by which my own Army career hinged on doing well at. Push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. 3 events, back-to-back. The scores were based on a scale up to 100, with standards differentiated by sex and age. The APFT was simple like that. Male, female, age, and your performance had a score. That was it.
The ACFT is very different. 6 events, for those of you keeping count at home, that's twice as many events as the APFT.
3 repetition maximum deadlift.
Standing power throw.
Hand release push-up.
Sprint drag carry.
Leg tuck.
2-mile run. At least that didn't change, Rod.
We begin the story by going to the source. We go to Fort Eustis, Virginia, where I sat down with the creators of the controversial ACFT. Why all these events? And how much is this going to cost?
My name is Michael McGurk. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel from the United States Army, working as a Department of the Army civilian. And I'm the director of research here at the Center for Initial Military Training.
And I am Lieutenant Colonel David Feltwell, active duty United States Army. I'm stationed here as the command physical therapist, and my primary role here is the doctrine developer for holistic health and fitness and the Army Combat Fitness Test.
Michael McGurk and Lieutenant Colonel Feltwell have been leading a team of experts in doing research into the physical fitness of soldiers and fitness assessments. They were charged with creating not just a new physical fitness test, but revamping the Army's physical fitness program in general. But many soldiers feel that the APFT was fine. Why fix something that isn't broken?
I think the Army has tried a couple of times to budge on it. There were several efforts, mostly after about 2000, to do different PT tests and looking at ways. What you have to look at is over time, and certainly 40 years is a great space of time, the industry and society has evolved. If you go back to a book, probably Jim Fix and the Complete Book of Running, the advent of modern running shoes and things like that, we've changed how we do physical fitness. The physical fitness facilities and equipment and things that are available to individuals in the military and outside the military today didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. So it basically was, we knew we needed to catch up. The time was right. Certainly the fitness of America's youth has been challenging to us, and we want to make sure that the military is on the right track forward.
If you were to look at the history of physical fitness across militaries, though, across the past several hundred years, you'd see essentially the same approach, an industrial scale approach that's highly constrained to conducting physical training for combat. So essentially large formations of troops working out at the same time in formation, led by other soldiers who don't necessarily have expertise in physical fitness, with low levels of equipment, low amounts of time, and often, certainly in the more recent decades, in the dark in the morning.
Lieutenant Colonel Feltwell just described PT as we all pretty much know it. Formation at 0615, PT starts at 0630, ends at 0730. It's PT from squad level to brigade, and even sometimes division PT. Formations of soldiers doing PT led by another soldier who may or may not be knowledgeable about physical fitness. You got less than 1 hour if you take out the warm-ups and cooldowns. And of course, you're often doing all of this in the dark.
A lot has changed in the world of fitness. We've seen fads come and go, but the science of fitness has become more and more advanced. From shoes we wear on our feet to computer-based modeling of your musculoskeletal movements, which we'll get to later. Fitness has changed, and the Army knew that it had to change with it.
So the prior test, the one that we're phasing out, the APFT, the 3-event test, is primarily a health-related test, I would say. It determines if a soldier is generally fit and healthy, but it correlates very poorly to their ability to perform combat tasks. Whereas the new test was specifically designed to correlate very strongly to a soldier's abilities to do the warrior task and battle drills and common soldier tasks expected of all soldiers. And so that's the biggest difference that you'll see there.
I think it's a validation of the whole soldier's physical readiness. It tests how well you've been training for the tasks that you are probably going to have to do at a minimum in combat. That is a completely different approach from what we've had before, which makes it more challenging, but also much more specific to the occupational tasks that you're required to do to wear the uniform. Because it's 6 events, and because it is a holistic challenge, it's also, there's a mental component to that. You can't show up and expect to do okay. If you want to do minimally, you could probably do that to pass at the lowest level. But if you want to do well, you have to think through how you will meet your effort, how you will prescribe or titrate your effort throughout the 6 events. That requires planning, and if you're thinking then in terms of how a unit would approach this, that requires some command thought and planning, so that the whole of the formation can get through having shown its full capacity.
As great as the idea may be of applying combat readiness to physical fitness, what about all the equipment necessary to run this PT test? That's a lot of stuff to field, account for, and use. The APFT could be done pretty much anywhere, anytime. So why all the stuff?
The old test perhaps gave you a good measurement of the wrong thing. So getting a good measurement of the wrong thing is not particularly helpful sometimes. So if we never test a soldier's strength or ability to lift something, and then in their job they need that strength or have to be able to lift things and they can't do it, the test has sort of failed us because it hasn't measured what we need soldiers to do. And so we realized for this test to measure what we need soldiers to do, you're going to need some equipment. So then we very, very carefully selected the equipment. We looked for equipment that was safe, right? We don't want a soldier to get injured. We looked for equipment that soldiers who are not very familiar with weightlifting, for example, can do. The bar that we use, called a hex bar or a trap bar, was specifically chosen because it is a beginner's type piece of equipment that is very safe to lift with and is very unlikely to cause back injuries when lifting with it, as opposed to an Olympic bar, which is more flexible for some events, but it takes a little bit more training and it's a little more challenging. So we picked the safer option there. The equipment we picked is very durable equipment, very rugged equipment. You know, it's waterproof. It can be out in the rain. You know, we were thoughtful in how we picked the equipment. And then the amount of equipment financially is very low. You're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 for a lane of equipment, which by Army standards, if you figure the equipment should last, 5 to 10 years across the Army, you're talking a couple of dollars per soldier per year for the equipment. That's very affordable by the Army.
The Army's revamped physical fitness program starts with PRT, Physical Readiness Training. Again, a program that turned the old PT standards upside down with some very different exercises and a new approach to fitness. The PRT program and the ACFT were designed to complement one another. So if you're doing the PRT program correctly, that should reflect in passing ACFT scores.
Policies behind ACFT have yet been finalized. Okay, so on the current physical fitness test, if you don't pass it, there's a responsibility of us to put you into a remediation program to train you up to pass it and to give you another chance to pass it. And then at some point in the future, it may result in adverse action to your career. With the new test, the Army is committed to giving everyone the time to get in shape for this test. We realize it's a change and we know it is going to take time. So to start with, for the very first year of it here, we're asking everyone to take the test twice if you're active duty, once if you're reserve. And that is just to get you familiar with the test. And then there will be another year after that that we'll be taking the test, and we'll determine the policies for when the test becomes final for record and has adverse actions if that's determined appropriate. They may determine that passing the test, there's different standards and different levels, and we'll adjust where that needs to be. We're looking out for the benefits of the soldier, but also for the benefit to the Army, because if the test is measuring your ability to do your task as a soldier, and we've determined that the test is accurately measuring those tasks, and you can't pass the test if you've been given sufficient time and resources and education and training to meet those standards, what that means is you're physically incapable of performing the duties of a soldier. And then the Army's going to have to make decisions on how that's going to impact the soldier long term.
I can speak from experience that the ACFT is definitely a challenge. My own reserve unit is currently taking measures this year to introduce the new events and to get our soldiers ready for the ACFT. Any fitness challenge with an assessment at the end requires a lot of work in the preparation phase. So we're definitely using this 1-year alibi to get ready for the ACFT to become a record test.
But still, the harshest criticism goes back to the cost of the ACFT.
It's estimated that the ACFT is going to cost anywhere between $68 and $78 million to field all of that ACFT equipment.
Is that price tag too high?
The test that we all have to face is combat. We can't replicate that. And if we were to try to get close to that, it'd be extraordinarily expensive and unfeasible. So any test of what that environment is a proxy. So we could all wear ACUs. We could all ruck up. We could all carry weapons, have our ACHs on and boots, and we could be tested one at a time through situations that have us filling sandbags, jumping over 6-foot walls, running a mile with our rucks on over obstacle courses. But it would be one at a time going through that with a grader watching everything we do. And it would take a long time. That's expensive. That's not feasible. So the equipment set fits into a test battery, a system that is feasible, acceptable, and sustainable over time, and of course affordable. So that's why you have the test and the equipment complement that goes with it. And as Michael said, it's dollars or cents on the soldier per year over the lifetime of that equipment.
The Army looked at a lot of different factors when they were trying to figure out what their vision would look like for the future of Army fitness. First and foremost, it seems to me, is that nightmare scenario at the beginning of the show. A soldier who is unable to perform their combat duties due to a lack of physical fitness. They were also looking at ways to creating a more overall fit soldier. These changes weren't happening in a vacuum. The other branches of the DoD had been re-examining their own fitness standards, but they were doing so from a different position as the Army, the largest branch of the military. The Army's budget is bigger, they have more people, so their mission is going to be dramatically different. So when the ACFT began to roll out, other branches were taking notice.
When the Army first came out, I think it was October of 18 was the first time I saw anything in the news about the new Army fitness test.
That's Colonel Stephen Arms.
Colonel Stephen Arms, the director of the Marine Corps' Force Fitness Division.
Colonel Arms was carefully watching what the Army was doing with their fitness approach and how they were implementing changes. Remember though, the Army is the largest branch and the Marine Corps is the smallest branch. Budgets are different, number of service members is very different, and their missions are different. The Marine Corps was also a pretty fit branch to begin with. They already had a gender-neutral PT test and an occupational PT test. Colonel Arms saw that the issue with the Marine Corps wasn't necessarily fitness, but the kind of fitness that also prevented injuries.
Our thought was, instead of taking that millions of dollars in buying gear and the sustainment of the gear through the years if stuff is broke or lost or whatever, take that money and invest it in a more holistic approach to fitness, i.e. the athletic trainers that we're hiring, 66 across the force, $8.5 million a year for to pay for those folks and the gear it takes. From what I understand, the cost of the Army, $8.5 million is a fraction of what it's going to cost them to get their gear. But the bang for the buck is, the Marine Corps, just from the infantry forces, just in musculoskeletal injuries, every year, we're spending about $32 million a year. Just in the operating forces and in the infantry specifically, $8.5 million a year, I can eat away at that $32 million sunk cost that we're already paying every year, probably by about 80%.
Now, the Marine Corps takes its Marines and their training very seriously. The average cost to train a Marine Infantry Lance Corporal is about $70,000. Think about that for a moment. From street to fleet, $70K. That's a huge investment. And the Marine Corps is going to demand a lot from that young recruit along their training pipeline.
If you're a high school football player and you want to play in the NFL, what are the chances of you doing that? And it's about 0.02% of going from high school on to the NFL. Ironically, with less than 1% of the U.S. population coming in the military, even fewer coming in the Marine Corps, it's about the same percentage. So we don't have the average person off the street. What we ask that Marine to do with their body, male or female, is a lot different than some of the other services and typically, than the average person off the street. So they have to view themselves as an elite athlete in everything they do.
Colonel Arms and the Force Fitness Division saw the Marine Corps Physical Fitness Test and Combat Fitness Test as efficient measurement tools, but he felt that what they were lacking was the sports medicine and injury prevention side. The Marine Corps turned their attention to athletic trainers and the kinds of technology used by athletic organizations like the NFL to test their players for fitness and vulnerabilities to injury.
Athletic trainers, strength coaches, technology, force plate, machine learning is something that we're diving into as well, to use technology to identify imbalances in a Marine before they enter a rigorous training program so that we can start to correct those deficiencies prior so that they don't get injured.
Colonel Arms talked a lot about the benefits of force plate technology. So before we go further, what is force plate technology?
Force plates measure the ground reaction forces generated by a body standing on or moving across them to quantify balance, gait, and other parameters of biomechanics. Professionals can measure a variety of different aspects of an athlete's movement to determine strengths, weaknesses, and where a potential problem could be hiding.
We were up at an NFL team not long ago, and I won't mention the team's name, and we had our CG there with us to show him in practice what a force plate looks like. And I asked the human performance director there, can we grab one of the players who was in the weight room working out? And so we grabbed one of the players. He came over, did a jump, had a great vertical leap, and was a defensive back. And but looking at his score, I asked the director, I said, hey, is he hurt? And he said, yeah, he's got a hamstring issue. I go, okay, what year is he in? He was just finished his rookie year, got hurt in his rookie year. And I said, well, what did the NFL or the combine score look like on his base plate jump? And he said, if we'd have really looked at that and focused on it and looked at that load explode drive, he had an imbalance there that we overlooked. And had we really looked at that closely, we could have fixed that imbalance because it showed us he was probably going to have a hamstring issue, which he did. That's kind of how professional sports is using it, is before they sign that contract, hey, is this person from a physiological perspective good to go? And there's a lot of other tests they do besides the force plates.
So athletic trainers and force plate technology isn't cheap, and Colonel Arms acknowledges that. But in the framework of saving the Marine Corps time and money, these changes were already paying for themselves.
For a Marine Infantry Lance Corporal, it's about $70,000 cost to train to get that person to the Fleet Marine Force. With 460 or so odd infantry Marines being discharged every year for musculoskeletal injuries, that's a pretty significant cost. We can really get after that. 3rd Marines, and I check in with the regiments that have the ATs to date, the ones that currently have them. 3rd Marines had about a dozen Marines that were headed out of the Marine Corps on a medical issue, but they all got returned to training. So that right there just paid for all the ATs that we currently have in the Marine Corps. And again, very, very small contract in the grand scheme of things, but it's keeping more Marines. And looking at General Berger's new Commandant's planning guidance, people is talked about throughout that entire thing. And this really is getting after the people aspect of what we do, is taking care of them and really giving them the resources they need as the warrior athletes that they are.
We've talked about how the Army decided to go with a very different approach to their physical fitness by revamping their entire program from top to bottom. We also talked about the Marine Corps instituting new policies to address sports medicine and injury prevention. But there are 2 branches left to talk to, and one of them was named the fattest branch of our military by a couple of publications. More on that after the break. This episode of Military Matters is brought to you by Stars and Stripes. Stars and Stripes provides independent news and information to the U.S. military community, including active duty service members, DoD civilians, veterans, contractors, and their families. Unique among Department of Defense authorized news outlets, Stars and Stripes is governed by the principles of the First Amendment. No slants, no agendas, just the news. Go to stripes.com and see the difference for yourself. That's stripes.com. Use promo code PODCAST, save 50% on your digital subscription. Use promo code PODCAST, 50% on your digital subscription. Go to stripes.com now. When your orders come in and it's time to make a plan to move or store your personally owned vehicles, International Auto Logistics is here as the #1 resource for U.S. service members' POV needs. Just use their website and get started at www.pcsmypov.com to get all of the information you'll need on storing and picking up your vehicle. Or just check out the just launched IAL mobile app. Just search for PCS My POV on the Apple Store or on Google Play. And now, back to the show. The Navy is in a unique position when it comes to addressing fitness. Many of their sailors are in locations that aren't necessarily fitness friendly.
we're operating in confined spaces. So we have different platforms, submarines, surface ships, and then our large decks, so our big carriers, or we're operating in austere environments that don't have very many, equipment available.
That's Lieutenant Commander Melissa Laird, a research physiologist with the 21st Century Sailor Office.
My role within there is to be the physiology subject matter expert. And more specifically, I'm the project manager of a revamp of our PRT. So we're doing a PRT study right now. So that's kind of my main role as it relates to what we're talking about today in physical fitness for the Navy.
Like all the other branches, the Navy is trying to move away from the idea that if you do well on a PT test, that means you're fit. Lieutenant Commander Laird knows there's more to fitness than just getting a high PT score.
We're always looking at trying to improve our fitness assessments, and we're really trying to move from a culture of fitness testing, our twice-a-year tests with our PFAs, to really trying to stress a general culture of fitness. So we really want everyone to be mission ready and ready to go 24/7, 365. So looking at trying to revamp some of our testing to try and push some of our sailors to adopt a better physical training program is really what we're ultimately trying to do.
The Navy has had a fitness system in place called the Navy Operational Fitness and Fueling System, or NOFS. According to their website, NOFS provides the Navy with best-in-class physical fitness and nutrition information for sailors, allowing the Navy to maintain peak physical readiness, which is a top priority of the 21st Century Sailor and Marine Initiative.
This program is a fantastic program that I think a lot of sailors don't truly understand what it really is. I think that if you ask the average sailor what the NOFS program is, that they might say like, oh, that's the bag of bands, that's the resistant tubing workout, but that's actually really not what it is. So our office is really trying to work hard with partnering with CNIC and the MWR.
CNIC is the Command Navy Installations Command, and MWR is Morale, Welfare, and Recreations.
To rebrand the NOFS program and then to outfit our fitness centers with these NOFS zones, which is like a functional fitness zone. So you may note in like one of the trends right now in exercise physiology and performance fitness is to really move away from the more traditional single muscle group exercises and really towards more of these functional movement patterns. So, these functional movement patterns are really very operationally relevant, and they more or less mimic real world situational biomechanics.
Functional fitness has definitely been a buzzword in the fitness industry as of late. Functional fitness is a classification of training that prepares the body for real-life movements and activities. Depending on who you ask, though, an exercise may or may not be relevant to certain movements or activities related to the military's occupations.
That's true, but I think the Navy and all the branches really needed some point to start from, and functional fitness has demonstrated some merits.
People are moving to these more, functional fitness platforms. And in general, as the science, moves in a certain direction, like HIIT training has also become very popular.
HIIT training, HIIT, stands for High Intensity Interval Training.
NOFS, has a component of that. So, we're trying to move away from command PT essentially being, I'm going to show up to, with my command and I'm going to do 3 PRTs a week. No, we don't want you to just be doing, push-ups, curl-ups and running 1.5 miles, 3 times a week. Excessive running puts a lot of wear and tear on the body. You're not going to get better just from doing those specific things. So we're really trying to push a well-rounded program and helping sailors actually do the jobs that they need to do on the ships.
One of the major changes coming to the Navy's fitness testing is the inclusion of planking. The plank is an isometric core strength exercise that involves maintaining a position similar to a push-up, except you're on your elbows and your forearm is level with the ground. You do this for the maximum possible time.
Specifically, the forearm plank came out of a previous study that was conducted actually by myself as the lead scientist about a year ago in March 2018, in which the Navy was looking at potentially developing an entirely new alternative PRT, in which we were asked to look at 10 different fitness modalities and then down select and pick the best ones to go forward if we were, again, going to completely revamp our PRT. So one of those modalities that was evaluated at the time was the forearm plank, and that is one of the reasons why it has been picked up. And then now we're in the second phase of that study to actually go and develop the standards, the performance standards for both men and women across the different age brackets within the PRT standards.
The Navy has also been listening carefully to its sailors and their concerns over the new planking test. You see, currently sailors do their PRT in this order: curl-ups, which by the way is like a sit-up, push-ups, and their 1.5-mile run. Sailors were concerned that if planking came first, that could affect the number of push-ups they would be able to perform.
We totally agree that your push-ups would be negatively impacted because you are essentially, when you're doing a push-up, you're in a plank position. So what we're doing from a policy side and what we're doing currently with rolling out or working on this study right now to develop the performance standards is we are having sailors do their push-ups first, and then we are looking at a mandatory rest time in between the push-up and the plank. And then we are developing the standards and having sailors then do the forearm plank for time. So our standards are actually going to be built on the fact that you will experience some pre-fatigue from doing your push-ups, but that will be reflected in the standards. So your push-ups will not be affected, and the standards that we have developed for the push-ups will remain intact.
Before we move on to talk to Des's beloved Air Force, we have to talk about some recent articles that came out saying that the Navy was the fattest branch of the military.
I know the article you're talking about, and I know that those numbers were taken from the Health of the Force report. Essentially, they took the height and weights from service members' medical records, and then they computed a body mass index, which again is essentially your body weight divided by your height in meters squared, and then looked at what that BMM number was, or BMI number was. So BMI in general is just used to broadly categorize a person's weight for height ratio as either underweight, normal, overweight, or obese. And you're considered obese if you have a BMI of 30 or above.
So according to Lieutenant Commander Laird, this article used BMI, or body mass index numbers, to make the conclusion that the Navy had the highest percentage of obese service members. Those calculations didn't take into account the Navy's processes for determining whether a service member exceeds their standards. In fact, during a recent assessment, only 1.7% of sailors exceeded the Navy's body fat standard.
So basically misinformation.
Very inaccurate news.
Our last stop, and certainly not the least of our military branches, is the Air Force.
I am Mr. Larry Anderson. I am the Chief of Air Force Physical Fitness Policy. So basically that's writing policy, anything Air Force physical fitness related with policy and programs.
So what is the Air Force's fitness testing program?
The question was asked to us was, does our fitness assessment meet the needs of the 2018 National Defense Strategy? And is our assessment meeting the needs of the 21st century airmen? So just to make sure that we're always identifying potential strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we decided, let's get an outside agency with who doesn't have any ties or biases to us. Let's have them also look at it and do a comprehensive review of our fitness policy and programs.
And the agency the Air Force turned to provide a comprehensive review of their PT standards was?
Well, of course, RAND. RAND has a great brand, and they have helped us out with tons of projects. I'm not familiar with all other projects, just this current one that we have that's in the fitness realm, but they have done tons of great studies and surveys and given us good feedback and suggestions on where we should go or where we could go in the future.
When the Air Force gets their study back, this could lead to some major changes.
or no changes, like Larry Anderson said, the Air Force feels like it's doing fine in regards to the physical training. They just want to see if they're missing anything.
The Air Force, though, has been working on a tiered system for occupational fitness standards.
The Air Force recognized that some jobs require a higher or different level of physical fitness than the general Air Force. Jobs in special ops worlds such as pararescue or combat controllers, for example.
At the time, they were taking 2 different fitness tests. They were taking our regular test and their own tests. So what the Air Force decided to do was, you know what, let's look at what they do downrange. Let's take what they do downrange and look at some of the common tasks and let's simulate those tasks. So once we simulate those tasks, let's figure out which exercises best fit what they would do downrange. So if you're a PJ and you got to carry somebody, what exercise best fits that? You know, maybe a fireman's carry, you know, then maybe a ball toss or things like that. So what the tier 2 tests, what it does is occupationally specific and operationally relevant. And it's gender neutral. It's our first gender neutral test, the Air Force's first gender neutral test. So of course we covered our special ops guys.
In order for an Air Force AFSC to get a tier 2 PT test, which would replace the general Air Force PT test, they had to go through a 5-step process that included a study of the occupation and what exercises would be tested. Once the 5-step process was complete, then they could put into place their Tier 2 PT test. Our TAC-P folks have already completed a 5-step process, so they had already included the 5-step process, and the rest of our special warfare airmen had gotten to like step 3, and then on their own kind of moved on a little bit further.
We ended up getting a 5-step process approved where our Air Force Exercise Science Unit for career managers can decide, you know what? You know, we're firefighters or we're defenders, we're cops. Our deployment tasks exceed regular demanding physical jobs. So we want to have one as well. So now we establish a 5-step process where they can ask for and get approval for a study. They'll go through the steps, identify those tasks, and come up with a fitness assessment, and then have a year adaptation period, and then it'll be final, and that'll be their tier 2 test as long as they are operational. And then they will be excluded from taking our tier 1 test, which is our push-ups, sit-ups, 1.5 miles, and abdominal circumference.
So the Air Force MOSs currently using a tier 2 PT test are explosive ordnance disposal, TAC-P, and TAC-P officers. They are actually doing a 10-component Tier 2 test. The next MOSs likely to get their Tier 2 PT test are combat controllers, pararescue, special tactics officers, and special reconnaissance.
Yeah, we're trying to change just some of that archaic thought process that we've probably had based off tradition. I think a lot of it was sparked in 2018, 2017 when Secretary Mattis was on board, and the rumor was that, you know, saw some folks who were a lot larger in uniform. And so that stigma was kind of passed down that, oh, you had to look this way in uniform. But that's not necessarily the case. I want someone who can pull me out of a burning building if I'm incapacitated, not someone who can run 1.5 miles in 8 minutes. Like I said, that's Mr. Anderson's opinion, not the Air Force's opinion. But I would prefer someone who can pull me out of harm's way.
Fitness is hard.
It's even harder when you're in the thick of it and your life depends on it.
Every branch is looking out for their soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. No one wants a tragedy to be rooted in being unprepared. Every branch wants the best from their service member and for their service member. So will the Army's multi-million-dollar gambit pay off? Will the Marine Corps athletic trainers become the DoD standard? Will NOFS reinvent itself in the Navy? And what will the RAND report find out about the Air Force state of physical readiness?
Whatever happens from here forward, there are lessons to be learned for sure. What matters is that success or failure, there's something to be gained.
Whatever your PT test is or was, be active. Get ready for the next fitness challenge. And if you're out and a veteran, maybe your old PT test could be a fun goal to try and pass. Fitness isn't just about your health. Someone might depend on you being physically capable. You never know when your fitness might be the difference between life and death.
But also have fun with your PT. Dang, Rod, why you gotta get all serious at the end?
Because we started off with a burning car, man. I'm just trying to end it, from the beginning.
Well, we don't want to be all depressing.
Could you pull me out of a burning car?
Yep, no doubt. But who says I'd want to?
Aw, that's just mean. This episode was written and produced by Rod Rodriguez. Additional production assistance by Desmon Farris. Executive produced by Benjamin Bateman. This was a Stars and Stripes production. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Desmon Farris.
And we'll see you at the next episode.
Stars and Stripes provides independent news and information to the U.S. military community, including active duty service members, DoD civilians, veterans, contractors, and their families. Unique among Department of Defense authorized news outlets, Stars and Stripes is governed by the principles of the First Amendment. No slants, no agendas, just the news.
Use promo code podcast and save yourself 50% off your digital subscription. That's promo code podcast, 50% off your digital subscription.
Go to stripes.com and see the difference for yourself. That's stripes.com. Also go to www.pcsmypov.com to get all of the information you'll need on storing and picking up your vehicle. Or check out the just launched IAL mobile app. Just search for PCS My POV in the Apple Store or on Google Play.